I used to go to McDonald's whenever I was hungry. I used to be addicted to the food there, but only for one reason. My dad would always treat me to the food there. What I didn't know at the time was that my dad loved McDonald's. Perhaps he loved it a little bit too much. Dad would always seem to encourage us to go eat there. Nobody knew why my old man cared so much about that joint, but he was mad about McDonald's. I began to feel worried and stopped eating there in fear that I would turn out to be just like my dad. Everyone in my family eventually noticed Dad's behavior, and my mother decided to try and talk to him about this addiction. Mother told Dad that we should be saving to go on a trip. Sadly, he wouldn't listen, only caring about McDonald's. It got to the point too, where we decided to stop eating there. We figured that it would hint to how tired we were of the food there. At first Dad didn't seem to mind so much. He ate there on his own. It wasn't until a week later that he began to snap.
Don't you care anymore? Why won't you eat out with me?
Everyone who was in the room, including me, said, "No, Dad, we just don't want to eat at McDonald's." Dad changed after that response. At first, we thought he would grow out of this, but he only began to act much worse. My father became distant with all of us and would try to avoid us. It seemed like he had a grudge against all of us, because he thought that we hated his favorite fast food joint. It got to the point where Dad could not live without eating there at least once a day. I was tempted to try and get help. Everyone was tempted too, but we were scared to do so. My mother began to get depressed and was tempted to just leave him right on the spot. It wasn't just because of his obsession, but it was due to the way he was beginning to act over this. After about another week, my dad would spend most of his time at McDonald's. Everyone at this point knew that my dad had become a lost cause. I was asleep that night when I was awoken by a loud scream. It was coming from my sister's room, and I immediately rushed out the door to her aid. My mother was also doing the same thing, and we both opened the door to my sister's room. Upon opening the door, we saw someone who looked familiar. It was of a clown who I couldn't see well in the dark. He was strangling my sister, laughing sadistically. My mother screamed, asking what he was doing here, but he ignored her. I was tempted to try and rush the clown in an attempt to save my sister, but my mother held me back, telling me that it was too late for her and that I would get myself killed. Fearing for the worst, I turned on the light. I was horrified. It was my dad. He had strangled my sister to death. He was still holding her neck around his hands and was dressed up as Ronald McDonald. I didn't know how he could have gotten that costume at the time, but it looked exactly the same as the McDonald's mascot. Was my dad talented at making costumes, and none of us knew anything about it? Both of us ran as fast as we could. As we ran, we heard loud stomping from right behind us. This caused us to only rush faster. We managed to get outside and didn't even bother going for the car, since the keys were still inside the house. We ran as far away as we could. I ended up calling the police, since my mom was too scared to do anything. It turned out that Dad had a warrant out for his arrest, to our surprise. It turned out that he had harassed some of the kids during his time at McDonald's. He would somehow get into arguments and even cuss at them. The cops searched our old home, but the only thing of interest was of my sister's room, which was now destroyed and showed signs of a fight happening. This was the only evidence that the cops had found. My dad wasn't found at the old house, and we never saw him ever again. I don't know what happened to my father, but I am worried that he's watching us. We have eaten at McDonald's hoping that he'll spare us if he finds us.